All right, I'm with Tom Woolrych, Mr. Geo Alpha himself. We spoke in April when I was at an undisclosed location.
Was it that long ago?
Now I'm at another undisclosed location. So we do these when I'm hitting the road doing site visits.
On the road when you have to wake up early and catch me on Central.
Yeah, the time difference is pretty wild between us right now. I think I want to say it's 9 hours because I'm on the West Coast.
Yeah. I just spoke to Joe from Pampa. It must have been 7 a.m. for him.
Yeah, he's in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, he's been traveling.
Okay, so let's get into it. Last time we discussed a bunch of different companies. Maybe we'll go over a couple of those again, but we'll do some new ones, including Pampa. But we talked last time about the Australian market, the ASX versus the TSX. And this is an area where I'm not super well versed in. Like, I've traded on the ASX like a handful of times, like when there was a really special opportunity and I just got on the IB account and I bit the bullet and I bought the stock on the ASX. But it's not my specialty at all. My specialty is obviously Canada and the US. So I want you to enlighten the audience. What's the difference between Canada and Australia in terms of junior mining?
Yeah, so there are some structural differences. That's not my area of expertise, but these structural differences actually are what sort of create the difference. Australia has an investment culture. There's no venture capital in Australia. The venture money is raised on the ASX, right? So private equity and venture capital it's a thing, but it's a small thing. You can easily get your risk money. You can buy risk on the ASX. So that's one thing. The other thing is it's just a lot of funds. So Australia has something called superannuation, which is mandated 9% of your earnings go into your retirement fund, your superannuation fund, as they call it. So this has caused a deep pool of capital, yeah, and then there's some regulatory differences. Vukas is currently on a campaign raging against warrants, right? So he hates warrants because people participate in a raise, they hold their paper for 4 months, they sell it, and then they just keep the warrant. So that causes some sort of clipping ticket type mentality. You do have options in Australia, as they call them, and you can trade. Quite often they're tradable options, but it's just not. There's not a culture of clipping warrants. So yeah, I guess they're the main ones.
So what you're saying is Australians are much more likely to hold stock for longer time frames, and the Bay Street, House Street rounders in Canada just dump as soon as they can and hold the warrants.
Yeah, look, I think that I haven't followed this whole life thing to the nth degree, probably as much as you have. But I think the ability of doing these life raisings is kind of fighting against that. And I have actually started to see recently quality projects like Pampa going live on life raises with no warrants. Yeah, so maybe it will change. We'll see, and maybe that's going to have to come from shareholders demanding it. So yeah, was that your question?
Yeah. So here's the problem though, because with Vuk, he is a smaller retail investor, and he may not have access to some of the placements that the rounders do, right?
Yeah.
And so they set the terms because the company can't always set the terms. The company has to see what the market's appetite is. right?
Yeah.
And unless you just drill the big hole and everybody's horny for you, then you have to meet the market. You can't
That's right.
just set the term. And even like Talon Metals, they drilled 2 big holes, and look what they did. They did a life financing below market. Now, the company will say, look, we had to do it at VWAP, 20-day VWAP or something. I get that. You can't just price a financing on a spike high off of a new intercept. But
yeah.
Still, like, it was a little disappointing to me that they did a life financing with warrants. Because I know I've done a study of these. The life financings that include warrants generally don't have good results for shareholders 4 or 6 months out, because, like you said,
people they're not forced to hold them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's either or, isn't it? Right.
Yeah. I think companies should try to do more placements where there is no warrant, even if the price of the financing is under market, like it's lower than it would have been otherwise, and
I mean, that's how I guess it's how you attract capital, is you give them a big discount, right? So it's going to be either all the lead order is going to set the price. He's going to say, well, if you're not going to give me a warrant, I want a 20%, 30% discount to the market, right? So, or the 20-day VWAP or whatever the metric is that you want to use. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. I've been on both sides, raising money as a part, being an employee of the junior, and being a fundee. So it's different every time. The book is almost always full before it gets announced. Yeah.
Okay, and then the final topic would just be share structure. Like, the Australians are totally okay with having 2 billion shares out, and Canadians are like, 1 billion shares? Oh my God, the company's ruined. So, how do you explain that, the culture of share structure?
Yeah. I have never, I guess because I'm Aussie, I've never really gotten the aversion to seeing a company with 1 billion shares out. I guess it shows that you've been, you haven't shown fiscal discipline in the past, right? You've had to, issue so many shares, but you can just do a 10 to 1, roll them back, 20 to 1, 30 to 1, and then, I mean, sometimes Canadians realize you just have to calculate the market cap from the amount of shares out. And again, it's a little difficult sometimes to work out how many, fully diluted shares are out there in Canadian companies. I guess that maybe that's a different to the Aussie market as well. You can see how many shares are out in Australia, and in fact, companies get a report from the share registry every day showing the trading from 2 days ago. So it's a T+2 system. And then you get a report saying who's bought and who's sold. So it's completely transparent about who's on your register. I think that's good. If someone's dumping your shares, you can ring them up and say, let me cross a block, stop selling. I'll find
in Australia, it's completely transparent. The company knows everyone who's bought and sold their stock.
Buy and sell. The reports come from the share registry. What are they called? Atomic and computer share.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Yep.
In Canada, you can get the NBO list, which is somewhat transparent, but it's late. Like, it tells you weeks later, and sometimes it's a little murky, especially when it's European or American investors trading through different brokers. It's not 100% clear. I've seen these lists, and I'm like, this is weird. Like, it's not.
That is something that retailers struggle with. They're like, oh, look, JP Morgan Chase own 15% of the company, but that's not. That they're the prime brokerage of a fund or an individual who they're holding those shares for.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's interesting. The difference between Australia and Canada. So the reason why I ask is because I was speaking to Joe, the CEO at Pampa, PM on the CSE, soon to be TSXV, and then also on the ASX. He's going to dual list. And he was kind of pitching me that, look, we got to get on a better exchange. We've got to get on the ASX. And when we get on the ASX and we get drilling, we're going to have a re-rating. And I'm like, well, how does that work? You know? So I guess you agree with him.
Yeah, I do. So particularly quality copper stories, there's a particular lack of them on the ASX. I've spoken about this on a couple of other podcasts. I think Money of Mine and maybe a few others. So in Australia, you've had a lot of consolidation. You've had a massive lack of investment in copper. Domestic Australian copper stories are pretty weak. The deposits are like Olympic Dam. I think it's the biggest copper mine in the world, copper deposit in the world, maybe second. Or, you know, they're tiny, 10 million tons, right? So there's just no junior copper explorers. And then what has happened is Oz Minerals gobbled up all the good tier 2 copper projects, and then Oz Minerals got gobbled up by BHP. So Sandfire's one. You've got a few companies that are dual listed, and then you go to you know, second place is like a massive gap there. I don't think I have any current Australian copper junior exposure. It's all TSX. So I do encourage companies to dual list in Australia, particularly if they've got good quality projects. And then Australians are going to be super receptive to something like Cobrasco, which is just a massive, massive opportunity.
Okay, let's talk about Cobrasco and Pampa, because the conversation was interesting, and I definitely came away from it, you know, seeing the company in a more favorable light. I definitely still have some questions about this state in Colombia. It definitely doesn't seem like a walk in the park, but he was very convincing that he can drill it, he can work there, he can move this project forward. So I'll give him a shot to prove that. But let's take a look at your model and what you're seeing there.
Yeah, 1 minute. So I agree with your comments about Joe. I was interested in the project when it was managed by Rugby Resources, they were called. Sort of an older story, stale story. But I was encouraging them to get drilling, but they never managed to. Okay, so here's my window. Is that coming on? You are presenting.
Yep, that looks good.
Okay, so the Rugby who I was talking about drilled 3 holes, 2.5 really. You can see them. They're sitting here on the Interleague frog model on a topographic surface with a background image of, I think that's the molybdenum in soils, right? So you can see there's a pink bit that potentially shows the footprint of Cobrasco. So when I was looking at it, I built this when it was still Rugby, and I just wanted to ask myself, okay, so you've got 2.5 holes, you've got wonderful hits like 172 meters at 0.74, 0.78. If you give yourself a molly credit, 138 meters at 0.7. So what you want in a porphyry discovery is a sort of ocean of 0.4, and then some cream, 0.7s, 1%. 1% would be quite high in a porphyry. So they're large tonnage, low grade things, and that this certainly has that characteristic. Now the third hole, they stopped drilling in 0.7 material, 100 meters at 0.7. So you could argue that they were kind of just working out the vector to the sweet spot, obviously to the north here, when they stopped. So exciting drill hits from 4 years ago. Now that's fine, but how big an area could that possibly be, right? So I got Leapfrog to create a numerical model. I gave it a bit of a, you know, I assume that there's a structure running. Sorry, I assume there's a structure running through the high grade, you know, something like that. Yeah. And I asked the interpolant to create a model with a bias in that orientation. Yeah. So what is the volume of that model? You can see that's already 65 million cubic meters. The specific gravity of rocks is 2.6. There's already 170 million odd tons within that blob. Yeah. So that's
just
big
based
already.
upon the first 3 holes, including one shallow hole.
First 3 holes completely open in all directions, right? Now what's kind of interesting and makes this project, this region, is that Cometer. I'm sure Joe spoke about the Rio Tinto and MCC private company joint venture. They're drilling down here on this river. They're getting the same sort of hits. Yeah. So if you take the ruler and you measure from Cobrasco to Cometer, I think, you know, that there might be a drill pad there. There's 3.5 kilometers of 0.4 copper. It's a huge, huge system. Yeah. We don't know if it's all linked up. We don't know if Rio and Rio are going to take operatorship of that joint venture, and Rio will be managing the drilling. So Rio is probably looking over the border, thinking, okay, now Pampa needs to attract a major, and we can co-develop this. Spend, you know, as good as me, you know, whatever, 6 billion developing a massive copper project in this part of the world. So, yeah. Now, the difficulties, as you mentioned. Well, I mean, what was the one thing that had you worried?
Well, I know a lot of people in Colombia. I know a lot of mining people in Colombia, and I've asked them about this project. And they say they wouldn't go to Choco.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big, I wouldn't say it's a red flag, because they could just be jealous or like they missed it or whatever. But, you know, these are people, I'll just say, who had an opportunity to have this project a while ago,
right,
and opted out just because of the difficulty of this area of Colombia. But the flip side is that things can be transitory, including permitting difficulties, governments, politics, and sometimes you just need a different operator to move a project forward. I've seen this many times in the mining industry where one company ruined a project with how they went about their business, and another company picked it up for pennies because they had, you know, destroyed the value of it, and then they built it back up again and turned it into something, you know. So
yeah.
I don't know all the background here at Cobrasco and what challenges, you know, Rugby had, and why they sort of decided to transact on it at this point. I'm not super well versed in that, but obviously it wasn't a walk in the park, or else they wouldn't have sold it, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of nuance there. There's an election in May 26. The center right candidate just got shot in the head last week. Yeah, so we'll see what happens in Colombian politics. So what you need, given the sort of unstable background like you've detailed, you need someone who extremely good managing the project. Now that's why I think Joe's the man for the job. So he's got a legal background. He was a resident in Colombia, I believe, for 8 years. You know, so he's probably the top Aussie first on Colombian managing mining, tenure risk in Colombia. So, you know, I'm totally confident he's the man for the job. That's not to say that, you know, we're all going to wake up tomorrow and the license will be cancelled. So Joe's there hammering hard. And one thing you have to do in that part of the world is get a deal with the Afro-Colombians, who are the, you know, native title holders of that area. So, you know, Joe's engaging with them, and all seems fine. So, yeah, a lot of risk, but a big reward, as you point out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the valuation tells the story. I mean, you're talking about a 15 million market cap for one of the best porphyry discoveries I've seen in the last 5 years. Right. So there's a disconnect there. This should be 150 million, not 15 million. So there's the opportunity.
At this stage, it could be 300, right? But what we've seen, and the story changed dramatically over the last couple of weeks as Joe's been tripping around Canada, is there is some institutional interest, and that's why he went live on the 4 to 5 million raise last week. It's just because there's demand for him to place some stock.
Yeah. Obviously, they had to raise money to drill this Cobrasco, and they're doing it. So the plan is starting to unfold, and I can see the catalyst for re-rating here, and that makes it interesting.
Yeah,
for sure. All right, let's move on to another one. I mentioned a handful of companies that I'd like to discuss with you. Do you have you looked at Talon Metals and their latest holes?
Unbelievable. So that I mentioned a company just now, Australian company called Sapphire. So that company started with a 30 meter at 30% copper drill hit. So what they did with that material at the DeGrussa mine in Western Australia was they actually dug it up and shipped it. They didn't process it at all. It was direct shipping copper sulfide, right? So I think what Talon have hit in this extremely deep part of their system, nickel and copper, I can't recall the exact number, it's 60%, 60 odd percent. So it's pure massive sulfides of chalcopyrite and pentlandite. That's DSO nickel or copper, depending on what smelter they send it to, I guess. So that's extremely exciting, extremely high value rock. So yeah, that Talon hit was massive.
So they've had 2 hits, right? They used the borehole, electromag to see something at depth, under an area where they have a pretty high density of drilling.
That's right, yeah.
And they tested this target, and I call it hole 50. They have these really long hole descriptions, so I just call it hole 50 and hole 63. Hole 50 was the 8.25 meter hit. That was something like 21%, nickel equivalent. And then hole 63 was the one with the 2 intervals that combined was about 35 meters of 29%. Pretty extraordinary. So in your interpretation, are they in the waterfall that leads to the keel or the pool of massive sulfides, or you think that this latest hit might be actually into the best part of the pool?
Yeah, I mean, it's early days, like you said, one hole. So I believe the plan for them is to now stick the EM down that hole, 63, I think you just said. So they'll actually know, they'll know the geometry based on that. This thing is going to light up in EM, right? So it's going to be extremely conductive anomaly. So they'll know the orientation. They'll have a feeling for how big it is, and the geometry, and then they'll probably go back down that same hole and start doing daughter holes, wedges, because it's quite deep. So yeah, it all remains to be seen. Now, in terms of the geological interpretation, when I looked at the section, I thought, well, that could be a nickel guys call it chonolith, a nickel sausage. So that sausage could have been chopped off by fault, and we're just seeing the chonolith, the downfaulted to normal fault. So we're just seeing the downfaulted side as a continuation of the main ore body. So we'll see.
That's interesting. But so yeah, okay, yeah, that's interesting. So the potential is that it could either be very small, or that it could be laterally extensive and quite large, like 1 million tons of massive sulfides.
Like we've seen in the hanging wall ore body, it's pretty laterally continuous, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, hopefully it keeps on going like that. Now, what's got me worried about Talon is actually not the technical stuff. It's the nickel market. You know, it's just the nickel price is just languishing at $15,000 a ton after the Indonesians kind of hammered the market doing high pressure acid leaching in Southeast Asia. So there's been no really exciting nickel stories come out in the last 3 years. You know, I was a big fan of Centaurus' Jaguar discovery in Brazil, Lifezone's big project in Botswana, and Talon. They're all really good companies, but they're just such massive headwind to all nickel stories.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's definitely why the stock dropped to 7.5 cents earlier this year, or last year rather. So I think that's the opportunity here. You have a potential world-class new discovery in the U.S. And it's not just nickel. I mean, they have copper, they have platinum, they have gold. It's many metals in the suite there at Tamarack. But obviously the driver is nickel. You know, that's the bulk of it. But you know, there's the possibility that maybe U.S. price for nickel could be higher than the Shanghai price.
There's been a lot of speculation about sort of dual pricing on these sorts of metals. Lithium might be one as well, a Western price and an Eastern price. But it's just no one's really pushed it forward, right? I'll believe it when I see it. But that's not to say there's not going to be some cheap money. You know, you lower your cost of capital when Trump's, giving out grants and incentivizing these sorts of projects into production. That'll make them competitive with the Southeast Asian laterites.
The DoD supports Talon very strongly, as you can see with the grants and loans that they've given the company. And then I've heard through the grapevine the federal government wants this to be built. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
What about the locals are a bit iffy? They're not quite pro mining as well. But yeah, I mean,
that's the way it is throughout the U.S. Like you're literally not going to find a project in the U.S. where there's not going to be some local opposition. It's just the way it is in 2025. So it really, like the South 32 project in Arizona, the Taylor, deposit, there's some local opposition there, but they got Fast 41 fast tracking from the federal government, and the DoD wants to see that built. So at the end of the day, jobs and
Right.
support from the federal government is going to outweigh the lefty
Access.
environmental opposition.
Yeah.
And that project, I've been to that deposit in the Patagonia National Forest in Arizona, and it's quite a picturesque scene. So, and there's a lot of mountain biking and outdoor activity in that area of Arizona. And they're going to build. I mean, it's going to be an underground mine, but they're going to build a mine there. Going to be a lot of truck activity.
You need truck, you need tailings, you need processing sheds. Yep.
Yeah. So if they can build a mine there, they can build this mine at Tamarack in Minnesota. Let's move on to Ramp Metals. This one, I really like this company because these guys are thinking outside the box and they're doing interesting things. What's your take on Ramp here in 2025?
Yeah, so I saw the maiden hits. Is it called Ranger? Help me out.
Yeah, Ranger is the gold hit, and Rush is the VMS.
Ranger and Rush. So I saw the maiden hits, and I was like, "Fucking hell! I need to work out what's going on here." I saw that Mark Bennett is involved, who's a kind of famous geologist speculator. I believe he's got a British background, but he lives in Melbourne, in Australia. He was involved in multiple massive discoveries. So Mark was involved. I asked Mark about it. And, he kind of said, actually, I don't know. I've got to go to Canada and find out what's going on. I expected him to say, this is the geological model. This is the plan. This is how we're gonna test it. This is a PhD level geologist. You say, I don't know yet. I haven't even gone yet. I believe he's since gone. And I saw I've met the gents on Teams, and I saw the gents at PDAC. So I still don't own it. Now the reason I don't own it is because I wanted to see. I want someone to sort of speculate on what the geological model is, and also for them to be able to prove up scale. Yeah. So the hits are super exciting. I guess this summer we'll know how big it's going to be, right?
Yeah, it's quite a curiosity. It's a curiosity because there's the maiden program was small enough that it didn't offer enough data to be able to really chew on and say, here's the model. But after now 20 drill holes in the second program, I think we'll have a much better idea with 5,000 meters of core to analyze across a pretty large strike extent. That should be enough to chew on and say, okay, this is what's probably going on here. But it is really interesting. There's like a VMS zone that's 3 kilometers away from this high grade gold zone. So
that's right. They're not on the same trend, right? It's super interesting. And I saw the core photos. They look good. They had some massive sulfides. They had some disseminated sulfides in the photos. So I guess we'll see those assays, in the coming weeks.
Yeah, those look pretty high grade. I guess the question would just be, it's VMS, and we know the range of scale in a VMS can be from pretty small to 10 or 20 million tons. So you don't know until you drill it out. But
they can be hundreds of millions of tons if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're really lucky. Yeah, I guess if you're. I haven't seen many above 20 million tons, but maybe I just haven't seen the right.
No, they're super rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good old Ramp. And what I do like about it is a young, dynamic team, doing new things. Saskatchewan, like who knew? So good luck to them.
Okay. Hercules new 3D model. So when we spoke in April, it was before they published this. They published a couple of new pieces of news since then. So what's your updated take on Hercules?
Yes. So let's pull it up. So the new interpretation, it did, got me super interested. I was constantly talking to Chris saying, like you've got IP running this direction. You've got everything masked by the tuff and the basalt cap. You got topography cutting down through the deposit. So you've got windows where you're seeing geochemical anomalies, and then you've got however many holes now, 21 holes, whatever it is. But it wasn't all hanging together. So this consultant in the Czech Republic, not far from me, he's put it all together in Leapfrog, and now each of the data layers are lining up and saying the same thing. The mag, the IP, the geological logging, the geochemistry, it's now all lining up, and this hanging wall, footwall interpretation just kind of explains everything. So now all Chris has to do is kind of step out and prove that Wojtek's Leapfrog modeling skills are as good as I think they are. So I'll just show you.
So basically, the way they drilled in 2024 was suboptimal, to say the least, in terms of the orientation of the drill hole. So basically, with this new model, it was a light bulb moment. We're like, hold on, we should be drilling at a northwest orientation. Is that right?
Exactly. So you can see all the old holes here. The fact that they hit anything was kind of just based on luck, So they've snagged it here, and they snagged the hanging wall there, and they snagged the footwall there. So these really deep holes, actually, they made the discovery on hole 5, which is one of these ones over here. In hindsight, I was super lucky. So now these black lines are what Chris is telling us he was planning for hole 1 and 2. They're probably on to hole 4 or 5 now. You'll know better than me. You're more regular contact with him. But so now we've got these 2 sausages of mineralization, and we've got what Wojtek did. How can I show it? Okay, so that's something I modeled. That's something I modeled showing the contact. So above there is the younger material, and below is the older. The Triassic Jurassic unconformity. And then I should have that there is the axial plane. So that's the kind of the orientation of the intrusive at depth. So the porphyry is coming up here, it's punching up, and then the copper is sitting around this sort of cupola, or this finger of porphyry that's come up, punching up, and the copper sitting in a halo around it. So now that the boys know this geometry, they need to drill all their drill holes at right angles to that plane. And Chris has done some really great videos, I think, with yourself, and then he did one solo, just sharing his screen, walking through it, and that's when I changed all of the orientations in my interpolation to match the sort of thing. His is far better, but mine's sort of like a stepped out macro look at it. And now that what that means is you've got high grade copper, it's already across 1,200 meters, so that needs to be drilled out, and probably first 400 meter spacings, then 200 meters in the hanging wall. That'll extend that trend. That trend crops out in Great Creek. You can see actually where that lozenge would pop out is right there. And then you've got the deeper. Now it's got a super.
So you're saying it should come to surface to the north at Great Creek, where you see the soil anomalies?
It probably does, yeah. And this background map that I'm showing is Chris's drill plan in these white traces. So he's got a collar permitted there, and then he can smash a hole down into it and test it. He hasn't put numbers on them. This map just shows the first two, but this just shows to me that he's going to systematically test it. Now he knows the geometry of the thing. He knows the orientation, and this will test it. I think I said that last year. I said, "Oh, we'll know," but this year we'll really know.
Yeah, this year I think we'll really know. I actually don't know which hole they're on, but I assume it's got to be hole 4 or 5 because they said a couple weeks ago that they added another rig or two, so they should be they should be moving along here. So this is interesting because there was a question about whether it was hypogene enrichment or supergene enrichment. Then did you see that other news release they put out where there's a study by the geo, I think he's from the UK, that basically said this is hypogene enrichment, and it's sort of a light bulb moment because it's very rare to see that sort of setting where you have an unconformity and then you have this enriched layer right under the unconformity. I mean, that would almost always be supergene, in a porphyry setting, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. So these are extremely old rocks, right? So, but what you see in Chile is you get what they call exotic copper deposits. This is where you enrich chalcopyrite to chalcocite. It's actually upgrade supergene enrichment. So it takes 0.4 and makes it 0.6, 0.8. And obviously miners really love that. They love the chalcocite blanket. So my first, when I saw that there was an unconformity, and I probably showed you in previous models, my first pancake model was assuming that would have a laterally continuous chalcocite blanket right at the unconformity. So it's great. The technical work at Hercules is extremely good. The quality of the geology, the quality of the consultants, and Chris himself is super high. It doesn't mean there's a deposit there. They still have to find it, but they're certainly doing their best.
Okay, great.
And I think they got a rig from Scout, didn't they, from Curtis?
Yeah, that was the news release at the end of May that they actually added a rig from Scout from Curtis. I guess Curtis decided not to drill his third priority target first because they're still waiting for the Forest Service permits for the Climax target, which is the highest priority target they have at Cuddy, where the geochem and the geophysics and everything lines up at Climax, and the anomaly looked pretty substantial. So he just said, we got to drill our best target first. We're going to wait for those permits, and meanwhile, it can make some money with the rig. So yeah,
they're private, so they can afford to take their time.
Right. Yeah. If he was a public company and he said we're going to drill this target and he didn't, he would be catching some flack on the bull boards right now.
Yeah, big time.
All right, let's talk about Ridgeline. So Ridgeline South 32. You can go through which projects you like because they have a pretty extensive project portfolio. The one that I like is the JV with South 32, where they have the CRD, the Chinchilla sulfide target right next to the Freeport porphyry.
I haven't put any work into it. So what's kind of got me interesting is the big blue, right? So that thing's going to have results coming out. Let me look here. So in May they announced drilling, right? Why do I like it? Well, again, it's porphyry style. So, if they find something there, big prize, extremely advanced jurisdiction in terms of, infrastructure and access to professionals and that sort of stuff, right? So, but the Carlin type, it's not my that's not my area of expertise, to be honest. It's extremely limited geographically to one part of the world, right? So yeah, I've never worked in them.
Okay.
So Selena and Big Blue.
Selena
like
is
belt.
the JV with South 32. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that drilling now?
They're drilling this month, so literally within a couple of weeks. And there's this big MT anomaly there that lights up like
yeah. I've seen that in there.
It lights up really nice, like a CRD.
Yeah.
And they're going to drill.
And that's good. And that's good that they've got a major. You know, if you're a little scrappy junior like Ridgeline, good management again. If they're using other people's money to test big targets, sort of the Kenneland model, right? So that makes sense for them.
Yeah, it's a good model because this is pretty much some of the most expensive drilling in the world to drill 800 to 1,000 meter holes there in the Southwest. You're talking in 2025 in US dollars, you're talking minimum $550 a meter now. So it's pretty pricey.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sort of heli drilling prices, right? They're not using helicopters?
No, it's just, it's expensive there because there's a lot of rigs being contracted, a lot of companies working, and nobody wants to be a driller in 2025. So the price is high.
Not like
everybody wants to be on OnlyFans or be a YouTube influencer. Nobody wants to sit out in the Nevada heat in June at 110 degrees.
Is that so? Is it good being a YouTube influencer? I mean, you're the only. I guess I could ask Antonio.
Is it good?
Is it a well-paid life?
I'm not sure if I'm an influencer, but maybe some people would call me that. It's not bad. It's fun. I would do a lot of this stuff for free, and I do. Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of it for free anyway. But it's fun. I mean, obviously, I have a passion for it. Final question, Tom. Your choice. A company or project that has you interested. Give me a 5 or 6 minute pitch.
Well, yeah. So, what have I been looking at? I put a post out on Twitter or X last week about probably my favorite. It's a small discovery in Namibia, made by WIA Gold. I reckon they're gonna put out a 3 million ounce resource. Currently 2.1, I think. And they've what's got me excited. I'll show you again in 3D. It's called Coco Seb. It's just been a beautiful technical discovery. I started following it literally from the soil anomaly. So they did really tightly spaced soils. They did trenching. The trenching had 1 gram in it. And then bang, they started drilling and tested a 4 kilometer long strike of the thing. So again, this is ASX. So you probably haven't seen it, I'm guessing. And we're up to 300.
I saw your tweets. Yeah, I saw your tweets, but I didn't look at the company in detail.
Yeah. So sometimes when I'm critical of companies, it's because they'll take a discovery from the 80s that they've found in some sort of old CDAR report, and they'll just twin holes or infill holes and say it's a new discovery, right? Or they'll say, we're drilling this because we want to verify what was drilled in the 80s, or we've got better assay methods. It's total bullshit, actually. They have really good.
It's actually very common that companies will say we don't have the core, so we need to confirm. Yeah.
I mean, if they were just honest and said we we want to create a nice headline so we can raise money, it'd be almost like a breath of fresh air. It'd be like our friend Al from San Lorenzo Gold. We should just we should update your listeners about the great. Did you see the email he sent me? I think he copied you in, and he was laugh out loud, slap rolling on the ground laughing after he saw our comments on San Lorenzo Gold last time we spoke. So I gave massive props to him for taking my comments. You were very fair. I was a bit unfair, but taking our comments in good faith, and I've been buying on the market just out of respect for the dude, right? So yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So he earned your respect by how he responded to the criticism.
Yeah, exactly. So he just was like, okay, I think the comment was like, we'll see if these old farts can do it again or whatever, right? And so good on him, right?
Good on him, because there's a lot of CEOs in this sector who would see a critical comment on a widely watched video and they would say, fuck that guy. Right. And that's the wrong way. That's the wrong way. Absolutely. Don't have thin skin. Like take it in stride and take the feedback head on. And if it's wrong, if it's unfair, explain why it is. And if it's right, then just laugh and say, okay, we're going to do better.
We're going to do, and that's exactly what they're going to do, because there's no doubt that the results, as we said last time, the results are super interesting, right? Now the hard work starts to see if it all hangs together. So again, back to Coca said, there's literally, when you say 40 meters at 1 gram, it doesn't set the world on fire, right? But there's a 40 gram meter on every one of these sections across let's call it 3, 2 kilometers easy, more than 2 kilometers, right? So this is going to be a massive pit. Early on, the strip's going to be zero in those, super expensive years when you're a developer. And then what I said on Twitter that got me excited, and it's nice that I can show it in 3D, is they're now drilling 28 meters at 7 grams at depth, right? So you could do 3 million in an open pit, and then because you can see how systematic it's literally a grilled grid.
How deep is the 7 meter hit or the 7 gram hit?
That's 400. You can see that number there, 400.
Okay.
So it's getting a bit tough for a pit, especially given the geometry of the ore body.
Yeah.
If you build a pit, if you do a 45-degree wall there and a 45-degree wall there, you can see the strip's already going to be too high. It's going to be 10 to 1 or something, and then you're just moving dirt. So, but these grades are enough for underground. Anything above 2 grams is pretty good for underground. So if they can prove up big tons at depth, who knows what you could tack on the end of the 3 million ounces. So yeah, this is a really good example of people doing good geology, being systematic about drilling, being honest to the market. The guy the executive chairman is Joseph El Raghi, who he comes from a sort of mining dynasty. His dad found what's the big Egyptian company? Start with C, Centamin. He found all those deposits that Centamin recently sold to Anglo Gold. So Joseph is at the helm. Andrew Pardey, he was involved in the discovery of, he's the CEO of Predictive, which is that deposit, that Bankan deposit that I also showed last time.
Yeah, so, that's a great one. Yeah, that's a phenomenal one, that Bankan.
Unbelievable, finger of God. And yeah, so the whole constellation all came together for me on WIA. Yeah.
So how big is this going to be, Tom?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident in saying, you know, the 2.1 is going to be upgraded to 3 million ounces at a gram, which is also pretty good for pit, right? And it's in Namibia, which is a wonderful jurisdiction. That was one bit of pushback that some of the Twitterati had. Was, oh yeah, who cares? It's in Africa. It's like, well,
yeah, you don't know Namibia. That's not Africa. That's not typical Africa.
Namibia is Africa for beginners, they call it, right? So yeah, it's you know, it's a small population. They're all highly educated. There's a mining industry already there. B2 Gold operating there. There's been offshore oil discoveries, so it's also, you know, it's a resource-rich nation. So that can be a curse in Africa. So we'll see how they manage this massive offshore oil discovery that's recently been made. Hopefully, it doesn't go the way of Congo. I don't think it will. And yeah, I love the place.
Fantastic. Tom Woolrych, thank you for your time again. Fantastic conversation, wide-ranging conversation, and I would love to do it again, maybe in August or September. I'm sure we'll have no shortage of drill results to talk about then as the results start to roll in from the summer season in the Northern Hemisphere. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Cheers.